make things worse. So what should we do? What is the actual solution? Well, for this answer, we go right back to this guy, Milton Friedman, who actually addressed the Club of Rome's paper, Limit to Growth, back in the mid-1970s. And the solutions he outlined back then obviously worked very well. So I see no reason why those same solutions wouldn't work just as well today and into the future. Editor, let's cut to the clip.
It is what you might call the difference between the economic way of thinking and the engineering way of thinking. The broader problem is very much epitomized by the famous Club of Rome report, Limits of Growth, which got so much attention a few years ago. You will all recall that that was a report in which engineers were saying we have finite resources, a finite amount of coal, a finite amount of space, and so on and so on. Things grow at exponential rates, and so long as things grow at exponential rate, they're ultimately going to become infinite. And since resources are finite, we're going to bump into it, and therefore we are faced with a terrible future in which sooner or later we're going to run out of steel or coal or whatever you want to name we're going to run out of. And we really have to adjust our sights. We can no longer take the view that we can have growth forever. In this country, in the 1920s, there was a great uproar about the fact that the total volume of reserves of petroleum available would only last 10 or 20 years. Today, the total volume of reserves, of known reserves, is higher than it has ever been, not only in absolute barrels, but relative to a year's consumption, relative to the population. How can that, what's true in the case of oil is true in the case of all of these other natural resources. Invention, discovery, innovation has enabled us to discover substitutes for natural resources. We cannot get out of the problem by being able to predict things that are not predictable. That the right conclusion is that the crystal ball is inevitably cloudy, that is the nature of the world we live in, that all specific predictions about the precise amount of this, that, or the other deserve skepticism. That what we need is not the kind of specific, detailed blueprint for the future that Huffman and Naring would like to produce, that what we need is an adjustment mechanism that will enable us to adapt to what happens as it develops. And of course, as everybody in this room knows, there is such a system, namely the price mechanism, which successfully steered us over several centuries from wood to coal to whale oil to petroleum to natural gas. That is a mechanism in which it is in the self-interest of hundreds and thousands and millions of people to make their best guesses about the future, in which it's unnecessary to have a single blueprint, in which you have an automatic adjustable mechanism as things develop.
And we can see going back to that chart in step number one, if we look at the 1970s, compared to how much energy we have today, Milton Friedman was spot on. So why does the free market work so well in solving these types of problems? It's actually very simple. As the price goes up, people naturally consume less. They don't need a central planner like Klaus, the World Economic Forum of the Club of Rome, or Bill Gates to tell them to do this. It's a natural process. And as the price goes up, what happens to innovation? It increases. So if we just let the free market work, maybe the price of oil would be higher. Maybe the price of coal would be higher. But that would incentivize the 7 billion people in the world to try to figure out a solution. But what the central planners are doing now is they're trying to manipulate the market in order to buy votes. And this is going to create more economic distortions, more misallocation of resources, and malinvestment, and this decreases the probability that we find a truly sustainable solution moving forward, which would allow for population growth, additional energy consumption, and for GDP, the standard of living for not just the rich, but the poor and middle class globally to continue to increase. So the problem is the central planning Malthusians that think they're just better than everyone else. The solution? Good old fashioned free market capitalism.